Let's start to look back at the Duke basketball season that was. Some individual seasons were really impressive, and Tyrese Proctor was one of the main focal points of the Duke basketball team throughout the course of the year.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. Thanks so much for being here with us today on Tuesday, May 6th, 2025. Locked On Blue Devils is your one-stop shop where we discuss everything going on inside the life of Duke athletics with a big-time focus as to what's taking place with the Duke basketball team. We're going to talk today about the season review for Tyrese Proctor and how excellent he was for the Blue Devils in their run to the Final Four in an ACC regular season and tournament championship and so much more. And we'll have that conversation with dear friend Kevin Connelly, 2 days in a row for Kevin Connelly from Ball Durham, joining us here on the program. If you have not done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free, wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Leave us a 5-star rating and written review, and you can also watch the show each and every day on YouTube. So without further ado, let's bring him on into the program. The aforementioned Kevin Connelly's here with us today. Kevin, hope you're doing well, man. 2 days in a row, off-season content is here, and it's time you and I start to review some of these seasons the guys had.
Thanks for having me again, JJ. Glad to be here.
All right, so let's get after it, man. Let's talk Duke basketball, specifically the season for Tyrese Proctor and the year that was. We'll kind of look at what he did this season, a career overview, and then kind of the next steps and kind of where he ranks amongst some of the Duke guards that we've seen in recent memory as we go through that discussion. When I look at Tyrese Proctor going into the season, obviously when we set expectations for the year that was in 2024, 2025, to begin our conversation here today, Kevin, you know it had to be a big year for Proctor, considering how last season had ended for him and also accounting for the fact that he was one of only 2 players that came back from last year's squad with Caleb Foster. That's kind of the big focal point or spot we should start the conversation is just he had big expectations. There was going to be a lot asked of him, given that he was one of the only 2 guys that came back.
Yeah, I think going into the season, a lot was going to be asked of him, and none of that really was going to be on the court. It was more going to be off the court and being a leader. And you have these star-studded freshmen that are coming in. You have some transfers who have certainly been around college basketball, but haven't necessarily been around the Duke basketball program. And how are they going to adjust to now being a Duke basketball player, coming from Purdue, even though Purdue went to the national championship game, and coming from Tulane and Syracuse and all these other programs. So I think first, when you're looking at maybe what the preseason expectations were for Tyrese Proctor, yes, he had expectations to perform on the court, but I think more importantly, off the court, he had a lot of expectations on him coming into the season.
And it felt like he was excited for that opportunity, right? The fact that you make that decision to come back into your junior season, you know the program for 2 years, you came in a year early, you've been with Jon Scheyer every step of the way. His relationship with Jon Scheyer was incredibly important throughout his career. It's something really fun for us to watch throughout the course of the season. I mean, it felt so clear that he and Scheyer were always kind of in lockstep with where this basketball team was.
No, 100%. And I think that was a cool relationship to see build as the season progressed and really as his career progressed. You look at the stories that we heard coming of the Elite Eight loss a year ago against NC State, and Tyrese Proctor never wavered in saying that he was always coming back. And obviously now in this day and age of college basketball, that has to be a two-way street. A player could want to come back to a school, but the coaching staff also needs to want you back as well. So the fact that Duke wanted Proctor to return and Proctor wanted to return, I think that was a great first step into kind of building the roster that Duke had this past season.
And so from day one, you look at the year that he had this season for the Blue Devils, it was a really good year. If you're watching us on YouTube, you could see some of the highlights of what he was able to do as a basketball player this season for Duke with 12.4 points per game, 3 rebounds, 2.2 assists. The percentages are really impressive for him across the board, shooting-wise. And early on in the season, you could tell that Caleb Foster was beside him and had the ball a whole lot. And then it turned into Sion James, and Proctor's role quickly was, let's get you some open shots and make sure you knock them down.
Yeah, I think, coming into the season, what we're talking about is, all right, you expect Caleb Foster to be his running mate in the backcourt, and that didn't translate this season like many would have hoped, and it ends up being Sion James. And Tyrese Proctor, kind of the development that we've seen from him over the course of his first 3 seasons, got better and better as a three-point shooter. His freshman year, he shoots 32%. His sophomore season, he shoots 35%. Now this season, he shoots 40% from three-point range. So you saw him get better and better. You saw just about all of his statistics get better as the season went on, or as his career went on as well. The only number that really took a step down this year was his assist total. He averaged almost 4 assists per game as a sophomore, just about 2 assists per game this past season. And I do think a lot of that had to do with Sion James being the ball handler a lot this year as well.
Yeah, and now look at the breakdown of the shots and where he was at. Proctor averaged 9 shot attempts per game, 6 of them from three-point range. So looking at the stats alone, they tell you this is a guy who wants to be a catch and shoot threat for this Duke basketball team, and want to be able to knock him down from the outside when he got those looks. And that's exactly what he was able to do. He was finishing much more frequently around the rim, which is something that we wanted to see when you review his sophomore year. We saw more dunks and plays above the rim for Proctor this season. I think that's going to be really important as he takes that next step. And then beyond that, looking at his season here as a junior, let's go to the defensive side of the basketball. He was always tasked with big assignments from great guards on the other side and never shied away from that opportunity.
Oh, and I think that's how he's going to project in the NBA if he gets a chance at making an NBA roster, is as a 3-and-D type player. I mean, I think a lot of people look at statistics and focus offensively, but Tyrese Proctor was also a really good defender. And if you could shoot 40% from three-point range and you can be a really good defender, you got a chance at sticking in the NBA.
Without a doubt. Excited to see what he's going to be able to do at the next level and continue to look at the career that Tyrese Proctor had wearing a Duke basketball uniform. One of our favorites, the Australian, was a fan favorite as well. And so we'll continue to talk about him and the season that he had after we take our first break here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at Upwork. You could start scaling your business requiring the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more. Experts ready to help you take on your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. Finding the right talent is really easy. If you need help with a marketing campaign, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who has delivered incredible results previously and can do the exact same thing for you. It's cost-effective growth. Instead of hiring full-time, Upwork finds affordable, top-tier freelancers to scale the business effectively and efficiently. You visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That is UPWORK.com, Upwork.com, to connect with top talent and grow your business today. Upwork is a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. Keep it going here with Kevin Connelly from Ball Durham. We're talking about Tyrese Proctor and the player that he is for Duke basketball. Kind of looking at the career picture for Tyrese Proctor now, Kevin, as we go into the second segment. 3 seasons playing basketball for Duke. In this day and age, over the last decade plus, man, it feels like we can count on one hand the number of guys who play 3 or 4 years for Duke basketball. So really glad that Tyrese Proctor is one of those guys. But his career journey starts with the fact that he's a late commit into the program and reclasses right away to come to college a year early.
Yeah, I think it certainly played a role in his development, to think that he was only supposed to be a sophomore this season, but you also heard it a ton that Cooper Flagg was only supposed to be a high school senior this season. So it's becoming more and more common this day and age of players reclassifying and moving up a year. So Tyrese Proctor, coming from Australia, able to do that and kind of leave an immediate impact his freshman season on the Duke team. And we'll get into a little bit later on, but that freshman season set the tone for what we thought could be a really, really big time career at Duke.
Yeah, a really big sophomore season and a career going beyond that. Looking at that freshman season in particular, I think the one big thing is that, hey, this is a new coach. It's not Mike Krzyzewski. When you look at that year, it's Jon Scheyer for the first time as a head coach. And once again, that was a Duke team coming off a Final Four exit in a situation where there were only two returners from the squad, right? It was Jeremy Roach and Jalen Blanks were the scholarship guys coming back to be with Jon Scheyer for year one. And then you got to bring in some transfers. You got to bring in a top tier freshman class, as Duke does for that first season. But Tyrese Proctor had someone like Jeremy Roach to sort of be under his wing, who had just led a Duke basketball team as a sophomore to the Final Four.
Yeah, and while we're giving Tyrese Proctor certainly some of his flowers and some credit here, I think really that first season, the most important player on the roster was Jeremy Roach to bridge the gap between Mike Krzyzewski and Jon Scheyer as a player. Obviously, you knew Jon Scheyer would eventually come into his own as a coach, but I think Jeremy Roach being there was able to help make the transition a lot smoother. I think we've talked about numerous times how Jon Scheyer being named the coach in waiting for a year certainly helped to make the transition smoother as well. And Tyrese Proctor was able to reap some of the benefits of that.
All right, now let's keep moving forward with Tyrese Proctor in that freshman season. Comes along, plays really well. At the end of the year, I'd go to that game against Tennessee. He had a couple of plays where it was just like, my goodness, this guy is taking over the basketball game. The physicality obviously hurt Duke in that one. Mark Mitchell did not play in the round of 32. Duke ultimately loses and their season comes to a close. But what a way to go out. And unfortunately, it kind of is the opposite of what we saw these past two seasons when you evaluate his final game of the season. That freshman year, he ended the year on a really high note.
Yeah, I mean, let's kind of call it what it is right now for Tyrese Proctor. When you watch this freshman season, specifically how he ended it and how he got more comfortable, you thought you had the chance of watching a special player at Duke for however many more years he would stay at the program. He was a good player. Yes, the shooting numbers were great this season. When you look at him as a whole, did he do anything on the court that was phenomenal? Like some of these other players that we've seen over the past 3 years? I would say no. Is he this superb athlete every time he steps on the floor? I don't think so. I mean, he was a good, solid, starting caliber player. Now, I know in his sophomore year, he had some injuries that forced him to miss some time, forced him didn't off the bench a couple of games. So he ran into some adversity there. But I think watching him towards the end of his freshman season, you thought Duke had a really, really special player that potentially could have been a first round pick in the NBA draft eventually.
Right.
Now you're kind of looking at, is he a back end second round? Can he work his way up to the middle of the top of the second round? Or is he going to have a professional career in his home country of Australia? So for everything we're talking about Tyrese Proctor, I think really that end of his freshman season kind of set the bar a little too high of what he legitimately was his next two seasons as a player.
Yeah, because we've talked about it, but it was Adrian Wojnarowski. It was a Woj bomb breaking the news that he's going to come back for his sophomore season, that he was a projected lottery pick at that point going into the next season's draft. And that expectation might have weighed on him a little bit, pressed a little bit with that Duke team that had more players returning his sophomore year than coming into the squad his freshman season. But again, just didn't quite live up to those expectations fully. And that's something that obviously he had to improve on as he came back for his junior season. I mentioned the Tennessee game, and I'm trying to think of some other great games in his career that really stand out to me. And I think the overwhelming number of them are going to come in his junior season, which is why it's great he's making this decision to come back or to go on to the NBA and start his professional career. I should say his sophomore season, I could certainly think of a game at Louisville where he was making some big-time shots and taking the game over, had some fun highlight plays in that one. But shooting-wise, what he did in those first two rounds of the NCAA tournament this year in Raleigh, going 13 of 16 in those two games, including 7 of 8 against Baylor. That's one of those lasting memories I'm sure I'll have about Tyrese Proctor.
Yeah, I think with a lot of players that come through the Duke program, and certainly they get playing time, like a Tyrese Proctor, you have a handful of games that you remember. Oh, remember when he was able to do this and when he was able to do that. And Tyrese Proctor certainly has a couple of them. It's just unfortunate of how his season ended in each of the last two seasons with a dud against Houston and then the dud against NC State in the Elite Eight.
Defensively, what do you think he projects once you look at him at the next level?
I like I said before, I think it is a 3-and-D type player because when you look at some of these players that'll be selected in the first round, you're drafting based on potential. You're drafting on athleticism. With Cooper Flagg, I mean, he's going to be the number 1 overall pick. He does it all. With Con Knippel, he is, I think, a under the radar athlete, but you look at his shooting numbers and kind of everything what he could do, especially at the next level. And you saw him be able to do more throughout the course of the season than just shoot 3-pointers. Come on, Malawach. I think he's a player who has extreme versatility at the center position. And he's so young with the talent he possesses. NBA teams are really going to be able to mold and fit him into a position on the team where he could really thrive. With Tyrese Proctor, I think it's not necessarily trying to get a square peg into a round hole, but he's not the biggest athlete. You kind of saw that through his 3 years at Duke, when they had the dunk counter between Tyrese Proctor and Ryan Young.
Yeah.
And no disrespect to Ryan Young, but you don't necessarily want to be
not the place you wanted to be
him in terms of an athletic standpoint, in terms of, well, Ryan Young has more dunks than you, and you're listed as a 6'3" guard, or excuse me, 6'6". Why did I give him 6'3"? A 6'6" guard who has aspirations of playing at the next level, and you don't really have that much of a game above the rim. So if he can really shine in some of these shooting drills, and if teams go on the film of his shooting numbers, shooting 40% from 3-point range this year, I certainly think he will get a chance to compete for an NBA roster and maybe play in the G League for a little bit. But yeah, I think if he wants to make it as a pro in the NBA, it's going to be as a 3-and-D type player.
Tyrese Proctor, absolute fan favorite. Love the guy and excited to see what his professional career looks like as he begins to take that next step. All right, we'll begin to take our next step by going to break here and then starting to wrap up our conversation on the show today when Locked On Blue Devils continues in a moment. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. How about those games last night on the road? The Knicks as well as the Denver Nuggets stealing game ones of the Eastern Conference and Western Conference semifinal series. FanDuel was all over it with the action, making it easy for you to stay in the game. You can go ahead and see live player props, performance trends, same-game parlays, and so much more. Let's take a look at some things going on tonight as you take a look at the Pacers and Cavaliers right now. FanDuel has the Cavs favored by 7.5. And then we've got game one between the Golden State Warriors and Minnesota Timberwolves. It is the Timberwolves favored by 6.5. All of that action is available to get in on over at FanDuel. New to FanDuel? Well, it's the perfect time to sign up, as you can head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Kevin Connelly's here with us. We're talking about Tyrese Proctor's season. Going to get to a couple of Duke basketball current offseason notes that have come out in the last 24 hours or so in just a moment. But we'll wrap up the Tyrese Proctor discussion here, Kevin. This is a guy that was a fan favorite, one of my favorite players to watch for Duke. He always had this kind of edge to him a little bit that I appreciated and knew that he was one of the top players. I'll always remember, like we said, those NCAA tournament games this year, the big 3-point shot he had at the top of the key against Auburn in that big game this season, a couple of the big dunks he had in the UNC game. And just a really awesome player. I'm glad we got to see him for 3 years because, once again, big picture, we don't get many of these 3-year guys with Duke written across their chest anymore.
Yeah, JJ, I know you were a big Tyrese Proctor fan.
Yeah.
So, credit to him for staying for 3 years. But yeah, kind of like I said, he was a really good, solid player for Duke. Just didn't cross over cross over into that upper echelon of recent players that we talk about over the next course of the however many years.
Yeah, and we've got more player reviews coming, and it's going to be exciting with you, Kevin, and other guests here on the show to kind of break down the seasons that were for this past year. But let's give people some portal news. That's what they're always looking for, always wanting to figure out what exactly the roster is going to look like for Duke. We mentioned some of the high school recruits right now that Duke's after, but yesterday afternoon, a new name began to emerge for Duke basketball. Jeff Borzello of ESPN was the first to kind of put this out there, but we're hearing that Duke has now entered the chat with Desmond Claude, it appears, a transfer portal guard. USC transfer who's also been at Xavier previously. What do you hear about this? What did you make of this headline?
I thought it was a little bit interesting. Desmond Claude, every indication was that he was going to Florida. He was visiting Florida. Florida was the only school you really and now Florida's not in the race. So did the visit not go well? Did Duke apparently entering the race this weekend change any of that? That report you're talking about, it highlighted Gonzaga, Duke, Virginia, Ole Miss, and Kentucky. Now, Kentucky's not in on him. I mean, just might be one of those things where they had somebody reach out to his agency and his agency reported that to ESPN. But everything I heard, Kentucky is not in the race for Desmond Claude, and Florida is now out of the race. So if you go based on that report, it's Gonzaga, Duke, Virginia, and Ole Miss. And if you're just trying to connect the dots, is Duke a very big player in this now because Florida is now no longer in consideration and dropped out? Was that based on Desmond Claude dropping them, or was that based on Florida saying, hey, we have enough guards, we're good here? So I think it's certainly something to monitor going forward. Obviously, is it a contingency plan for Duke based on what happens with Isaiah Evans and Cedric Coward? So I think it's certainly something worth monitoring over these next couple of weeks once the NBA draft combine begins next week.
Yeah, he averaged about 16 points a game at USC this past season. Played for Xavier, like we said. Your story over at Ball Durham, you're just already on top of it, Kevin, which is awesome. The photo there is a photo of him playing against Duke from earlier in his career when he was at Xavier. So I think you look at what he's able to do offensively, sharing the basketball and scoring. The numbers are good. If we begin to critique a little bit, the shooting percentages are not necessarily where you would want them to be for Desmond Claude when you look at him as an outside shooter.
No, he's not the greatest three-point shooter in the world. Even going back to his 2 seasons at Xavier, he shot under 30%. He just got to 30% this year at USC. He does much more of his damage inside the arc. And you really see his scoring numbers explode over the last 2 seasons. He was the Big East most improved player in his sophomore season, kind of was a fringe rotational player as a freshman, stepped into a starting role as a sophomore, follows Eric Musselman to USC, and now is looking for his 3rd school in as many years after spending his first 2 at Xavier. So he is a good point guard passer, can rack up the assists, but like I said, it is just a name to monitor here for Duke going forward.
All day long, we've been talking about Tyrese Proctor, 6'6". Here's another 6'6" guy in Desmond Claude. So we'll see how this progresses, if there are any other updates from the Duke perspective there, and so much more. I mentioned your website a moment ago, Kevin, but that's certainly a place where Duke fans can stay up to date.
Yeah, absolutely. BallDurham.com. We got fresh content every single day. So come give us a read all the time over at BallDurham.com, and you can follow us on social media at Ball_Durham.
Appreciate the time, Kevin. We'll do it again soon, okay?
Thanks so much, JJ.
All right, that's Kevin Connelly joining us here on today's episode. Do again go support his work over at Ball Durham. Also, make sure that you subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Also, watch us each and every day on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Leave us a 5-star rating and written review on the podcast platform. Let us know your thoughts on Tyrese Proctor's career, how you'll remember him as a Duke Blue Devil, and what you thought of his junior season here in 2024-2025. That'll do it. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you again tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.